Welcome back, Mighty Vandals, to Tubbs the Club, your University of Idaho affiliate on the Big Sky Podcast Network. I'm your host, at least today, Brian Marceau, joined by Dallas Hammer in Spokane. Dallas, how's it going?
Not great, Brian. Let's just rip the Band-Aid right off. These are the types of episodes that make me wonder why I have stuck around doing Tubbs at the Club as long as I have. This is not the kind of thing that you think of when you're saying, hey, we've got a podcast covering our university's athletics. This is not the type of thing you want to be talking about.
Which is another way of saying, hey, Martin's not here. So he's busy. I think he's doing some work related. So he's doing something worthwhile, which is maybe more than we can say for us. So look, Dallas, you already brought it up. And hey, comment section. Hey, Captain58, MVP so far of the two comment section. Question: what is something you can say about Tubbs episodes and the Chris Gonzalez resignation? Answer: better late than never. You know what? We landed at 6:54, which when our posted time is 6:45. I have a word for that. Or two words for that, actually. Those two words are on time. So, look, we got to get started. Hey, Around the Bar brought to us by Hughes River Expedition. The big news, and hey, Dallas, producing in public, is that better? That more centered for the camera? Dallas is double dipping as a pseudo producer. He let me know my camera was garbage. I only really pay attention if I can see the duster in the background, and I can. So we're going to start. Here's the news, guys. So good news and mostly bad news. Good news is Chris Gonzalez is now a former University of Idaho volleyball coach. So on May 31st, 2024, which that's 5 days ago, we're recording on June 4th. So 5 days ago, Chris Gonzalez resigned as head coach of University of Idaho's volleyball team after 2 seasons. Gonzalez picked up 5 wins in 2 years. So please never forget that while we hit the rest of this. So Gonzalez resigned 28 days after initial draft of a confidential report regarding a roughly 7-month investigation was released, not publicly released, to complainants for initial viewing on May 3rd. Now, hey, if you're wondering, hey, we're at the end of June, now we're into May. When the report's released, individuals named and cited in the report have a chance to clarify, rebuke statements attributed to them in the report for the sake of accuracy. So that report comes out May 3rd. Then Chris Gonzalez resigns 28 days later. Now, this is a little bit of an odd resignation because he's paid through the rest of the year. His contract ends on December 31st, 2024. He is paid, and this is according to Jody Walker in the Spokesman Review, as well as in the OC Register. He's going to be paid $50,000 to not coach for the next 6 months, which, hey, you guys, you can call that a resignation. That sounds like no different than a for convenience firing to me. So as a result, this is again according to Jody Walker, with Chris Gonzalez no longer a head coach, the University of Idaho immediately closed the investigation, immediately pulled access to the preliminary version of the report from the complainants. By the way, with no notice. If you're wondering, like, hey, the athletes get advance notice of this? No, they found out at roughly 10:19 a.m. via email on Friday. So really, Friday, May 31st. So essentially the same time all of us found out is when the athletes, who spent a lot of time being interviewed, put a lot of their own effort into getting their story, feels like the wrong term. It's their lived experience, documented to try to rectify the situation. The university gives them no notice whatsoever. Separately, the report, the preliminary version of the report was only available to complainants who officially filed with OCRI. A lot of athletes from both 2022 and 2023 wanted to read the report because they were interviewed and took part in this report. And the administration continually, their representatives to OCRI and also the athletic administration, continually told athletes who asked to view the report, hey, we're working on it, we're working on it. Then the entire access was yanked from everyone with no notice. So if you were not an official complainant, you did not receive a copy of the report. So the investigation is over. There will be no officially completed individual investigation of Chris Gonzalez. the climate and culture report, which the university went out of the one thing the university went out of their way to communicate through this process, and I mean one, was that the university had chosen to broaden the scope of the investigation to include climate and culture of the volleyball program, and presumably that would cover some of the administrative failures of the athletic department that led to the documented abuse. I'm using shorthand that we've talked about extensively on the show, that Scott Reed's written about extensively. That climate and culture report, nope, completely, it's never going to happen. It's over. So with the investigation over, according to the spokesman review, Idaho has spent $384,400 on investigating Chris Gonzalez, plus $50,000 as a payout for the rest of his contract. So we're nearly $500,000 of investigation, with the end result being a quote unquote resignation, where the guy gets the rest of his contract, and the investigation itself is just completely done. The athletes have had it very strongly intimated to them by Romana Kriskova that Romana Kriskova is going to be named interim coach for the volleyball team. Nothing's been announced. If you're a #OnlyTubs Discord member, you've known about this for a very long time. But Romana Kriskova is the only coach even listed on the Go Vandals volleyball page. So she will be essentially starting from scratch. There's currently 10 players on the roster on Go Vandals. Those players now have 30 days to potentially enter the transfer portal, which sweet. Teams have essentially finalized rosters. So that's not really that much help for them. By the way, the administration kept continually telling athletes to stay later and later in Moscow State, to hang on in Idaho later and later and later, to try to see this through. And then the university just torpedoed the entire investigation on their own for convenience. So the report in general found sufficient evidence that Chris Gonzalez was responsible for retaliation, sexual harassment, and national origin discrimination. So that's kind of the big data dump, Dallas, of what we just covered. Before we talk about Andy Kaus, no, they can't. Kaus, no, they can't. The individual players were there. The reason I said that, Andy Kaus, the comment section, said the complainants can choose to release it. No, they can't. The complainants were advised by their own attorneys that, hey, this is not a finalized version of the report. You will be legally liable for releasing this to the public at all in any sort of way. The version of the file that the athletes were given was only viewable on a computer. It had protections, so like people could not do screen captures with the device they were viewing the document on. The file could not be shared in any sort of way. Now, like, there are certain ways around that, of course, but the reason I bring that up, Andy, is they don't have the ability to share it. They were because there was never a completely finalized report. They were advised not to. And Chris Gonzalez resigned before a completely finalized version of the report ever saw the light of day. So they can't just release it if they want to. And their access to the report has been pulled. Keep in mind, it was not printable in the first place. It was hosted. It'd be hosted, Dallas. You can speak to this better than I can. But the type of file would have been hosted by a specific server, platform, cloud, whatever you want to call it, that the individuals don't have control over. A different administrator of sorts had the ability to give and pull access of the report itself. So Dallas, with all of those basic things said, we have individual component parts that we're going to hit as takeaways that we have from this report. Before we get that, anything I missed in the data dump you think we need to cover before moving on?
No, I think you've covered most of it, Brian. I mean, if you are somehow hearing about all of this for the very first time, I highly encourage you to go to the OC Register, ocregister.com. If you type in Idaho or volleyball or Gonzalez, any of those keywords should take you right to this. You can get a much more written out and described section of events. We've got our old episodes where we break through things as you go through. Brian, I just can't get past some of the things said in this article the fact that Gonzalez was placed on leave after the report just recently, and that's what happened. That's like his only punishment here, and then he gets the $50K essentially buyout to just quit coaching 6 months early. This whole thing just stinks, Bryan. Not one single time have I thought Idaho has been actively trying to make things better for the players. This entire time, this has felt like somebody fucked something up well long ago, and this has been a cover up ever since. And that's what we're going to get into. I think that's my reaction. There are so many people that have been fired for so many things, so much less than this, especially at a public institution. And now we're just led to, okay, well, hey, Gonzalez resigned, so we're just going to shutter everything and ignore all of the things that led to this. Anything that was a contributing factor to the fact that this started in November of 2022 and ended in June 2024. Doesn't matter, doesn't care. University is just shutting the door and trying to move on from it and not look at it.
So pause, clarify. I said November 2022. No, this investigation would have started November 2023, but you're referring to there were reports about this to Terry Golick, which we'll hit on this. Reporting about this behavior began in 2022, happened early. We covered this, that prior to this investigation starting, that it sounds like there were no fewer than 24 people who attempted to inform Terry Golick over the last couple of years. And look, hey, I have actual emails with timestamps from 2022. So we're going to hit that. But lots of people tried to inform, lots of people tried to do something about this. So to narrow the timeline, Dallas, investigation starts November 2023. It was delayed a little bit after the athlete said, hey, could you please let the season end? Because keep in mind, the guy was cited already in the report for retaliation. Athletes were reasonably concerned at the time about retaliation, so they just wanted the season to end before an investigation began. So investigation starts November 2023. Chris Gonzalez is not even put on administrative leave until March 2024, and then resigns late May, but it's going to be on every penny, every salary penny of his contract looks like it's going to be paid out. So now the individual component parts that I want to look through as takeaways. Before we get to those takeaways, want to go over Mike Colton saying national origin. So racist behavior. Like pretty much. It sounds like a version of that, Mike, where look, Chris Gonzalez was famous for, he had international background. He recruited lots of international players, and you put those two together, man. So it's, not necessarily like directly racist as in, brain dead color of skin, but using those, it sounds like using some of those same negative trope stereotypes, but just referencing country of origin. Kevin Ridenauer, long live the Duster. Yes, I'm late. So are we. PC Collins, you mean the assistant who was complicit in the fired coach's behaviors, now the head coach? We're going to talk about that. With Kriskova, it's a little, I'm not saying Kriskova is clean 100%, but there's some gray area where lots of people are going to probably feel different about that. Jason Mayer, many at UI have been released for much, much less. What complete and utter incompetence at the administrative level. Taylor Cash, there has to be some sort of litigation coming that will shed light on this. Yeah, I hope so. Absolutely hope so. Patty Frakes, howdy, folks. Thank you. Captain 58, I said it before. You can't blame any player who brings action against the U of I after this debacle. They deserve justice, and they got a big FU from this admin. Yeah. So individual takeaways. Dallas and the private chat, we hit Andy's comment, so we're good there. Okay, individual component parts takeaway, guys. So first off, we're going to reference ourselves for a second. On this show, we try to be fair. I'm not saying we hit that mark, but we actually try pretty hard to be fair, which is say we cover good things as other good news, bad things as other bad news. And we will at times say, hey, let's wait and see what happens before we completely have an opinion on the final piece. So,
by the way, unrelated to volleyball, all of the NCAA lawsuits, that's why we haven't talked about it much on the show, because that's, again, we try to understand as much as we can before we just come out here and start talking about shit.
Believe it or not, we care about being correct. So individual component parts we talked about. Hey, so one, because of our own experience with families reaching out to us, at the onset of this investigation, one of the things that we said, hey, this is something to pay attention to if this is a real investigation. So like there's a couple of reasons why we were concerned about the legitimacy of the investigation itself. One was the fact of hiring Thompson and Horton. Thompson and Horton, Texas-based, their background is largely in protecting larger institutions. They're involved in the Art Briles Baylor investigation. Yes, some people got fired, but the basic background that even Thompson and Horton boast about on their website is protecting institutions. So first question is, if Thompson and Horton's doing this, would the investigation itself, would it narrowly focus on Chris Gonzalez and then, hey, we got rid of the bad guy, we're all done? Or would this truly cover as much wrongdoing as they could so Idaho could take action and fix what needs to be fixed? Dallas, with the fact of closing this investigation, not even touching climate and culture after Chris Gonzalez resigned. So how do you feel about phase one legitimacy of Thompson Horton?
Like there is none. There is absolutely none, Brian. I feel like this was honestly kind of a sham from the start. Even in this report or the article from the Register, that there's a passage that mentions the report details how Gonzalez informed investigators that Terry Golick told him Vandals players were not telling the truth in alleging he had physically and emotionally abused, bullied, retaliated. His statement contradicts the statements by Golick and other university officials that they were unaware of bullying and abuse allegations against him. So in the report, it points out that he said something contradictory, but yet Thompson and Horton, and again, Jackie Werns being both at Thompson and Horton and an employee of the University of Idaho during this time, we talked about it at length before, Brian, that just did not feel like this was going to be, not fair is not the right word, but it just, the optics around this were not good. It did not look like Idaho was trying to put their best foot forward for all of this. And then we hear that Jackie Werns is inaccessible. And in this article, it mentions that she was inaccessible and did not respond to the athletes' questions and concerns in a timely manner. That's exactly what I expected when it was announced that Thompson and Horton was going to be doing this, and a Thompson and Horton partner was the interim head of OCRI. It lined up like, oh, this feels like they're really just going to try to sweep this under the rug. And to me, Brian, that's what it feels like they did.
Okay, so phase one, the legitimacy of Thompson and Horton, which is say, hey, was it a thorough investigation of wrongdoing to take rectifying steps, or was this a let's get rid of the brain dead guy and then cover everyone else? There's no other implication to take after the investigation closed like this immediately with no other steps after Chris Gonzalez resigned, and to make such a big deal about having a climate and culture investigation in the first place and then pretend, well, obviously Chris Gonzalez was the only issue with climate and culture whatsoever. So, hey, are there going to be a ton of people who feel that this was not a legitimate investigation? Yeah. And I honestly expect a ton of the athletes are going to feel like it was not a particularly thorough, particularly legitimate investigation as well. Phase two, would this be a legitimate investigation?
Before you get into that, you mentioned the players. I want to hit that very quickly. Marissa Drange, former Idaho player, in the article quoted as saying, at least he's not going to be able to harm any other athletes in the future. But I think the university should have continued to pursue the investigation. It's just kind of a cop-out to say, oh, he resigned. There are other quotes in here. Emma Patterson is in this article. She's also in the Spokesman review. There are plenty of girls that are out there saying the exact same thing. This just doesn't feel right. Sorry, Brian. Continue. Phase two.
Hey, phase two of the legitimacy. One of the things we talked about is like, hey, if this is a again thorough attempt to find out what was wrong and fix it and have decisive accountability, decisive action at the end, then this would have to incorporate 2022. Well, I got to tell you, based off the references to Terry Golick in the Orange County Register, yeah, she sounds like she simply lied, because she absolutely knew about allegations of abuse. I have timestamped emails from 2022 that for a fact Terry Golick had been contacted before this current round. For a fact, Terry Golick met with athletes from the 2022 team before this season to go over allegations against Chris Gonzalez. And then she is cited in the report as saying, or as it is attributed to Golick, that Golick was unaware of Gonzalez's poor treatment of the players and does not negate the overwhelming evidence of poor treatment. Sorry, that's misread. That's from the report saying the fact of Golick not knowing doesn't matter. But Golick told investigators she did not, and university officials, that she was unaware of bullying and allegations against Chris Gonzalez, presumably prior to this. So no, like, hey, like PC Collins is saying, bailing me out from stumbling for a second. In 2022, Terry completely blew off players, and when they came to her with the exact same issues, how does she not have any culpability in any of this? So, well, yeah, hey, that's where we're hitting. So did this investigation cover both years? Because the reason we said that is if this covers both years, it's not just Chris Gonzalez that failed. Like, we had Debbie Buchanan on here who talked about how there's a lot of administrative levels that should have caught this in 2022 and in 2023, including a senior women's administrator, which would be Terry Golick herself, a person who came with a Title IX background from Wisconsin. So you talk about the athletic department having failures there. Do you question about, hey, does Blaine Eccles have Dean of Students Blaine Eccles, does he have culpability in this? Chris Walsh, head trainer, when there were issues with players being forced to play while hurt, was he a person who should have reported this earlier? Because having women play when they were hurt did not just magically happen in 2023. That was a pattern of Chris Gonzalez, which, by the way, I also have timestamped emails that was sent to Terry Golick before the 2023 season. So she had a lot of ability to have a clue about this. So
Brian, Marissa Drain just quoted in the article saying, this should have been taken care of a long time ago. This should have been taken care of when I first went in to talk to Terry Golick in the fall of 2022.
Yeah. So in short, to cycle this does this investigation include 2022? Like, apparently just minimally with Chris Gonzalez, because we know players from 2022 were interviewed for the Chris Gonzalez report, but with the closing of the investigation, with Jody Walker releasing a statement that no further actions will be taken, it seems the university is just fine to say, like, oh, well, hey, like, we got our results. Chris Gonzalez was a bad guy and no one else screwed up. Let's attempt to move on.
Yeah, I want to call out Taylor Cash in the comment section. All of this because Terry can't be wrong. Narcissistic and caustic behavior on Terry's part. Couldn't agree more, Taylor. This is what we've been talking about for a long time, Brian. Just to continue hammering home there was things in 2022 that were very obviously, it's all being swept under the rug now with this shuttering of the investigation. Taryn Vreeling, who played for Idaho in 2022 and 2023, recently just transferred to Wazoo. She said in the article, now the question is who's next? We got the action we wanted with Gonzalez being forced out, but it's frustrating because there's still a lot of parts that need to be addressed. Terry is a part. She ignored it. President Green ignored it. Now, all of a sudden, it's stopped. There is no justice.
Okay. So another part we talked about of this investigation, look, we knew it would take a while to be thorough, but would this investigation move as timely as reasonably possible to also give athletes a reasonable chance to control their futures if need, if going on somewhere else was the right call? Well, the investigation took 7 months. After 7 months, not a single disciplinary action took place as a result of the investigation. Chris Gonzalez went on admin leave. That's not understood as disciplinary. That's honestly a protocol step for most investigations. He didn't lose any money. So Chris Gonzalez, yeah, he's not the coach anymore. Sure, I'm sure he was told you'll resign or be fired. I don't know why it's just so impotent to even give him the option of resigning, but they did. So not a single disciplinary step was taken after 7 months. 7 months plus nearly $500,000. They could have just fired the guy right away for convenience in the first place. They fired John Newley for convenience for no reason whatsoever. And John Newley,
there was a reason. Terry didn't like him.
Correct. Okay. Other than Terry not liking him, there's no reason to fire John Newley. So look, they can do this. They set the precedent of firing people when they wanted to. So, hey, Terry absolutely, hey, they failed on that front, but this is also not just a Terry thing, because this was, with the investigation being run by OCRI, that means it was higher level administrators, like guys like the president, Scott Green, for a fact, this was part of their decision making. Scott Green sent out that email on January 19th saying how the process would be: the investigation takes place, the report's going to come to me, and I'm going to decide to do something or not to do something. Well, if he's the guy who made the decision, like he said on January 18th, 19th, his own words in that email he sent out, his decision appears to be that no one deserves to be fired for this. Apparently, no one did anything wrong, at least not in any way he's willing to go out there and openly admit to the public as any sort of rectifying step. Which, by the way, if you're anyone who has any background with trying to rebuild bridges, acknowledgement of wrongdoing absolutely has to take place. I'd assume the dude who wrote a book on crisis management would be okay with that. But
well, Bryan, you'd also think that a president who has, again, gone on a tour to show everyone how well he prepares for crises and how well things are handled, you would think that you would not be stuck here with a 5-win in 2-year volleyball coach with a bunch of allegations of harassment against players that were then found in a 59-page report to be true. That hands asleep, just asleep at the wheel. Bryan, hands off, just letting things coast, letting things crash.
Yeah, we'll get to our individual reaction to some of that in a minute, guys. So, hey, other question about was this going to be legitimate was you already covered Jackie Werns and players labeling her as inaccessible. Shocking. We covered 7 months. No one was fired whatsoever. Nearly $500,000 sunk into this. Separate question: is the university willing to acknowledge that it wasn't just a culture of volleyball, but there were other areas of institutional failure that lets this happen again? Well, no, they're not going to publicly acknowledge that. They closed the part that would have potentially covered beyond just Chris Gonzalez. So essentially every single metric we talked about what we, as outsiders, what we expected to see for us to call this, for us to say, hey, give this process a minute to play out before we judge. All the things that we identified as, hey, if these things are taken care of, we're going to say, hey, this is okay. This was a reasonable step, a reasonable attempt to fix things. No, the university failed on all levels. Every single way this investigation could have been a failure, it was. And I'm not going to give any credit for moving on from Chris Gonzalez, who could have been fired a long time ago. And you want to call it a resignation to pretend this is PR University? Go ahead. No one with a brain believes a person who is paid the rest of their contract truly resigned. That's a for convenience firing. So the best that they could do after 7 months and going with this high profile law firm and talking about on the few times that Jody Walker or the Vandal accounts would address things in public, the only things they would say is like, hey, these things take time, whatever. After all that time, the best they can do is not even officially fire a guy who was fired. This could have been done in a day back in November. It could have been done in a month in December. So before we move on to our further reaction, we do have to talk about, we're told, Romana Kriskova being the interim coach. By the way, there's no one else that can even have a prayer of being the coach. There's not a single other coach listed on the staff. It's June. Look, season starts, fall sports start in August, guys. So there's no time for essentially anything else to be the case. Now, if you're wondering, hey, what type of background does Romana Kriskova have? Well, hey, look, she played at Wisconsin. She also, before that, she played at Virginia Commonwealth, where she was an all Atlantic 10 at the time tournament team and all A10 rookie team member. Also was a A10 Atlantic Player of the Year sophomore year. So, like, hey, very successful time as a player. Transferred from VCU to Wisconsin. After Wisconsin, played pro from 2017 to 2022. Did a little bit of time as a volunteer assistant in France. But as far as like being a coach, her only experience was last year with Chris Gonzalez. So now phase one, it's going to be hard to do worse than 1 win. So I expect Kriskova is going to certainly have more wins because it's very hard to not beat that metric. It's kind of like Zach Claus. This is worse than Zach Claus thing. But the thing that was brought up earlier in the comment thread, I'm not going to hunt through to find where, was, hey, so a person complicit in this is now the head coach. There's going to be one of the problems we talk about this investigation taking so long, Dallas, is that it's going to annihilate the ability of this team to cohesively come together, because no matter what, also we have a mix of some of the foreign players who are concerned about potential retribution the whole time. But you're going to have some players who are just want everyone gone, and some people who are going to be okay with just Chris Gonzalez being gone. But now you don't have a team that at this point is in any way reasonable way say together, and it's because of this process. So why would some portion of the players, and some portion of the players are okay, we've been told, with Kriskova, some are not, so they're split there. But we've been told that some of the players are okay with Kriskova because in the scope of the investigation, it came out that in the investigation, which is of course is not public, that she was supportive of the players in ways that she could. She's not an American citizen, so her concern was that if she lost her job, her and her husband are kicked out of the country. That's a pretty big barrel to be standing over as an assistant coach. And we were also told, like, hey, there were some ways where she certainly did not vouch for Chris Gonzalez in the investigative process. There are apparently some low-key ways she attempted to curb things on her own, at least that we were told. Now, is it fair for some of the athletes to say, like, hey, not enough? I'm not going to complain if anyone says that. But there also are going to be it is reasonable. I feel it's reasonable to both be frustrated about Kriskova being theoretically complicit, while it's also okay to say, look, if the person's concerned about getting kicked out of the country, that they're in their first year as an assistant coach, probably picked in part so that Chris Gonzalez could feel like he had more control. That's about as awful a situation as you can possibly be in to start with. So if she did do some steps that were helpful, or attempts to be helpful to the athletes, I'm okay with that. I certainly don't feel negative about Romana Kriskova the way I feel about Chris Gonzalez. She certainly is she's no like Kalisha Goree, who was quoted in the original Orange County Register article, essentially saying everything Chris Gonzalez did was perfect and all the athletes were just too soft. That's not Romana Kriskova to what we've been told. So Dallas, before we get to our reactions to individual parts, we're going to take a break to talk about a good thing for like 2 seconds, which I'm glad I gave you no notice for that break. You're welcome. That is a great Google page. Google's almost as good as, there we go. Dallas, you're muted.
Tubbs doesn't pay the bills, so my computer is a little extra slow when I, no warm up. So, you know what is warmed up, Brian? These pipes. If you are looking for a great all-inclusive week-long vacation, don't look past your backyard. Hughes River Expeditions has been vandal-owned and operated since 1976, and they're ready to take you on the vacation of a lifetime. Enjoy a multi-day trip down the Middle Fork of the Salmon, the main Salmon River of no return, the Salmon River Canyons, or even the Selway. You can check out special trips like one to see the Perseid meteor shower, camp on pristine beaches, run amazing whitewater, hike scenic trails, spot wildlife, soak in beautiful natural hot springs, and fish some of the most remote stretches of river in the entire country. Just bring your clothes and let HRE handle the rest. Grab a paddle, catch dinner, and ride the bull all throughout the Gem State. Call them now at 406-540-4450 or check them out at hughesriver.com.
So now we have takeaways, because to put this narrowly, we covered the individual component parts. We went through our own audit of, hey, these are things that if this is legitimate and fair, we're going to see these things across the board that we're not. So Dallas, reaction. We'll cover a few more material things as well here, but I'm going to give the wheel to you for a second. Your thoughts, man?
I'm going to take this wheel and drive this car directly into a giant brick wall, because that is what it feels like Idaho has done throughout this entire process. I am so disappointed in this institution. I am sad that I give money to this institution. I am fucking disgusted at being a vandal right now. This just... Brian, you spend your whole life being told, like, hey, do the right thing and things will work out. And then you see something like this where the report again has 59 pages. Now, not everything that was initially claimed was true, because Gonzalez did not actually sexually discriminate against his female assistant coaches, because the report found that he treated Brian Bastuba way worse than he treated any other assistant. So, that's why we did the report, to see what the hell was actually going on. And what the report finds is that Chris Gonzalez was a horrible piece of shit. And this was going on for a long time and nobody did anything about it. And it's devastating to me to see that Terry Golick is still here. There is no further investigation into how any of this happened. Again, what we know is Terry Golick handpicked Chris Gonzalez. So Chris Gonzalez is just let go, and that's all that's going to happen here is he gets a buyout, and it's okay. Volleyball is restored. It's great. It's back to normal. We've fixed the program. That's how when you look at the things that were claimed in this report, obviously, hopefully we can get a copy of it someday. But again, the university pulled all the access because they don't want people seeing it. If we, Brian, I'm speechless. If we had some sort of issue where we had to look into someone and said, hey, we got to look into producer Martin here. We got to put up a 59-page report on all of the seducing that he's doing that's not supposed to be happening. We wouldn't just cut him loose and say, okay, hey, everything's fixed. To be like, well, hey, how did we get to this position? It's baffling. It's mind-numbing. I'm so frustrated that this is how this is ending. Is Gonzalez is given his buyout and he's allowed to just walk away, and that's it. There's no further investigation into how this occurred. It's just tough shit. Better luck next time. It seems to be how the university is treating it, and it's honestly despicable. I want to shout out D Green 1562 Abel. I know a volleyball player who feels betrayed. Mr. Green, if you ever want to talk with us, I think you've got Bryan's contact information. I think you've got a bunch of our contact information. We're happy to, and this goes out to any former or current or potential future Vandal Volleyball parent or player or coach or anyone related to Idaho Volleyball. We would love to talk to you to get your thoughts on this, because this is just, it's sad, Bryan. I expect better from a school that I'm usually pretty proud to be a part of.
Yeah, so like when this first came out, like I felt ashamed and embarrassed to call myself an Idaho Vandal, and I don't know what else you're supposed to feel. Look at D Green saying volleyball players, he knows the volleyball player feels betrayed. What else are you supposed to feel right now if you're an athlete? Look, hey, further from the OC Register report, Idaho spokesperson Jody Walker said President Scott Green and Terry Golick remain in their current positions and declined to address the players' criticism of the decision to shut down the investigation, the university's handling of the matter, and of warrants. So, hey, what else are you supposed to feel? You make the one thing the university makes a big deal about is the climate and culture thing. They shut it down immediately, probably when it was painfully clear it was going to implicate more than just Chris Gonzalez. And now further firewall of like, hey, we're not going to address any concerns whatsoever. Yeah, if you feel like you're betrayed, screw you. You've got 30 days to leave the university through the transfer portal if that's what you want. Yeah, sweet. So, no, felt completely embarrassed to be a Vandal. I'm pretty pissed. Honestly, like I had moments where I was wondering, like, okay, if this is the level the university is going to support the athletes, like, why do a show that promotes them at all? And if just to address, like, hey, most people who listen, most people in the comment section, most people message in, they've been good, supportive, reasonable. Even if we don't agree with everything, they're fine. There's some portion of people who are going to say, hey, well, volleyball, like, who cares, right? And my pushback to that is they're student athletes at the University of Idaho. I don't care what sport they play. They're people going to the school I went to that I have 2 degrees from. They deserve to be treated well because they're people. They're people who are also, as athletes, they're putting a ton of their own time into making this work. They deserve to be treated well. The university, they just failed them absolutely. So look further. I don't know how anyone could have any respect whatsoever for Terry Golick at any level so far. Please keep in mind the only thing that she really did well, she did not want to hire Jason Eck initially. That was not her first football. That was not the first person she wanted to hire football wise. So with keeping that in the back of your head, guys, first off, she screws up almost everything she touches. She has like the inverse shit Midas touch. That's Terry Golick right now. Second, the report has it that though I'm sure there's a way to weasel out of this and legally say, well, hey, I wasn't aware of the 2023 allegations until the 2023 allegations took place. But the implication of the OC Register article and the Spokesman Review article is that Terry Golick was not truthful in saying she was not aware of the allegations. And I 100% buy Chris Gonzalez being quoted saying that Terry didn't believe the allegations because we had a ton of people tell us the exact same thing in 2022 and this past year. So, I mean, honestly, I don't know what you could possibly do to have anything but disdain for Terry Golick. Even if her contract is not renewed July 31st, she deserves a firing. That's it. She deserves the shame of being kicked out of her job. Obviously, that appears like it's not going to happen, which leads me to the second thing. I don't want to sound like I'm disregarding the good work Scott Green's done at Idaho, because he has done some very important work, especially when he first came on. Ton of great steps in helping out, getting the university back to back on its feet financially. That absolutely matters. So please don't pretend that means there's been nothing good that's happened out Scott Green time. We've spent a lot of time on the show and talked to a lot of people who, most of the time Scott Green's been president, they're pretty happy and proud to say that's the guy who runs our school. Yeah, his second act's been a struggle. The University of Phoenix deal falling apart because it appears legally it should have. I mean, if a deal violates the state constitution, that should be dead on arrival. We have a term for an idea that requires violation of the state constitution for execution. It's terrible, not worth anyone's time, and impossible to do. Then we have this, where because for this step, the OCRI part, this was above Terry Golick's head. So the person pulling the strings, making calls here, was Scott Green. This level of response from the university is impotence. This level of response from the university is feckless. And look, again, biggest takeaway: no one should have any respect whatsoever for Terry Golick. She deserves none. I lost a lot of my respect for Scott Green. I mean, hell, in November, I was quoted in Skyline Sports speaking very highly of Scott Green, because at the time, before some of this stuff happened, I didn't think there was any other way to feel about Scott Green as president other than pride and stoked that a guy who is kicking ass was our guy. That, oh man, this is a pretty rough step down from how things had been gone in the initial step of his time here.
Bryan, it takes a lot of that luster and sheen off of his records and resume.
Yeah,
and you look at it as maybe he's chasing headlines and trying to make things look better than they actually are, and is more concerned with the presentation of things and not how the things actually exist.
Yeah, which in a different way that you're saying, it sounds like, look, when he first started, I thought of nothing but, hey, leadership, results, things going great. You're talking about now this is starting to feel like a, colloquially speaking, politician. 100%. Yeah. The other separate thing to talk about the athletes, the reason you're hearing frustration, us talking about shame, us talking about embarrassment, is I need someone to tell me which part of this the athletes did wrong, because I don't know of any. I know the athletes worked exhaustively to take care of this initial, in-house, to go through having captains meet with Chris Gonzalez. None of it worked. They for 2 years tried to meet with Terry, and she didn't care about a word. Golick didn't care about a word the athletes had to say until paid attorneys in Texas told her, like, hey, they're not completely wrong about everything. And that was the only time there's any sort of tone change. So I'm angry at the university for it's important in my life. I'm about to be retired, a former teacher, but one of the guideposts I have for working with people is if they're doing the right thing, I want to reward them for doing the right thing. Especially if they're in a tough situation and they're taking responsibility, they're doing what they can to try to fix it before blowing it up. I want to reward that. And the university just showed, like, nope, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how well you handle yourself. It's not going to be good enough. The administrators are more important than the students who make up the university. The athletics administration is more important than the athletes that they administrate in the first place. So if there is no takeaway of this whatsoever from the athlete, the perspective of an athlete or perspective of a student, nothing to take away except that, hey guys, you're not important. But the admin being able to keep their 6-figure jobs and us being able to pat ourselves on the back and say we didn't, fire someone, that's what matters at the University of Idaho, which is it's nothing but disgusting. As
EC Stang says in the comment section, they followed policy and it got them where? You can't sum it up better than that. The women of the Idaho volleyball team, past and present, did not do anything wrong, Brian. You go to the spokesman article. Another thing I wanted to quickly mention for everyone. So we've gone over the university spending almost $400,000 on the investigation and then another $50K on Gonzalez. Well, in the material for this investigation was a letter dated November 30th, 2022 from Chelsea Mason, who played under Chris Gonzalez at University of Idaho in the early 2000s. Mason implored the university in her letter to listen to allegations from the players, claiming she suffered a broken rib in 2004 under Gonzalez's practices that she listed as dangerous. And then this quote is particularly damning to me, that this, again, was written November 30th, 2022. Complaints levied against Christopher Gonzalez should not be dismissed as pouting or tempestuous outbursts thrown by teenagers and young adults or overbearing, dissatisfied parents. These are evidence of unprofessional, abusive, manipulative practices that have spanned Gonzalez's career. These are cries for help. And following policy, the university put 2 big middle fingers up and said, fuck you, we don't give a shit about you.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to.
It sucks, Brian. Like there's nothing else to say. Like this is a fucking shitty thing. Like I would so much rather be talking about, hey, 2.5 months from now, maybe Idaho is going to beat Oregon. Like we should be talking about like silly, ridiculous things. It's the summer. We should be excited that football is coming around the corner. And instead, here we are talking about how this university could not figure out how to handle a coach that won 5 games in 2 years. Couldn't figure out how to protect players. Couldn't figure out how to get him the hell out of here in all of this abusive behavior. Couldn't figure out how to do anything correctly. And to me, Brian, at this point, it starts with Scott Green. There is no redeeming Terry Golick to me. Scott Green still has a chance to do the right thing and move on from her and clear things up. But the more days go on, Brian, the more I just think, all right, we've had shitty presidents here before. We got another one. It's time to lather, rinse, repeat of let's move administrators out and bring ones in and see if they do a better job. As again, D Green in the comment section, the women got Jack and shit and Jack left town. It's pretty spot on.
Yeah, I mean, look, we do a show covering Idaho sports, and we do like we get there's some patronage we get, which hey, patreon.com/Tubs the club, become a hashtag only Tubs member, costs less than a cup of coffee a month. Although if you want to pay more than that, we're more than cool to get more take more money. We put a lot of time into this. We put a lot of research. When we have our journalistic moments, like covering stories like this, it takes a lot of time, and that's not meant to pat myself on the back. That's to say we do the show because we love the University of Idaho and because this place means a lot to us. We have listeners. We have paid listeners who the reason they pay is because they feel the same way, is that Idaho means a lot to them, not just going to the games, the institution itself, and the fact of the institution succeeding, the fact of the sports team succeeding, and the fact of people who had such a good time at Idaho that they want to make sure other people get to have that same good time that they did. That's the reason why we do the show. It's the reason why we've got the listener base we have. It's the reason why we have 161 listed live listeners at this moment. Honestly, this overall is behavior of an institution that doesn't deserve anyone's respect. That's where we're at. If this is the treatment you're okay with giving the athletes who make up these teams, if this is the message you want to send, that administrators' careers matter more than the athletes, that's unworthy of respect. If what you appear to care about is the checking the boxes to minimize potential litigation instead of solving issues, if that's what you care about, you're unworthy of respect. So it's great to me that we're running into our break here, because I need it, man. I think a lot of listeners need it too. Look, Idaho, since the end of football season, look, we pretended during basketball season with 2 new coaches that things were better because we were all being reasonable. We were trying to be normal people who know that it takes time to turn around garbage, or like, hey, first year basketball head coach who's hired late needs time. But legitimately now, because we can look back on what actually happened since the final football game in December, it has been nothing but garbage covering Idaho for the most part.
At least the major sports that we talk about on the podcast.
Well, yeah, like, hey, all respect to Alex Pribble. I think things are going to be better, but that's the highlight now. And they had 10 wins. We have the university couldn't even sign a volleyball coach. And Terry Golick was too feckless to fire her when she wouldn't sign a contract. Then we get to bookend that with, hey, it took a long time to even throw Gonzalez on administrative leave. He lost no money. And now after nearly $500,000, we're too soft to even fire a guy that has 5 wins in 2 years and documented differing types of abuse over those 2 years. What are we doing here?
Well, Bryan, you're actually making the argument for Scott Green being a fantastic president, because if you remember, there wasn't the money to get rid of Paul Petrino for his performance when his pay would have been $500K buyout, but Idaho's got $500K to piss around on a bullshit investigation that they could have easily taken steps of beforehand. So, hey, financially, Scott Green got the university in a better spot. So everything else might be burning down around him, but hey, at least we have some money apparently to just piss away on these investigations.
Yeah, and I don't even want to bring up, because we don't know the result yet, but again, hey, like, nothing changes with Scott Green, nothing changes with Terry Golick as a result of this. July 31st is when Terry Golick's contract ends. By the way, Taylor Cash, the comment section, that Orich money is coming in clutch. Yeah. Idaho goes after Orich for $30,000 for, and I need to clarify this. We talked about it. Obviously, guys, read your contracts before you sign them. Read your contracts before you sign them. But Orich was told that there was nothing added to the contract except extra money, and explicitly asked if he should have his agent look over it. He was told, no, there's nothing extra added.
And Bryan,
well, that was false.
Who do you think told him that?
Yeah, Terry told him that. And there was a buyout added in there. So just to catch everyone up on that, when Taylor Cash says that Orich money coming in clutch. So like, Orich gets a bonus for exceeding expectations. And then when he does what you're supposed to at this level, which is do a kick-ass job at one place and then earn your way up to the next, Idaho goes after him for $30K. Chris Gonzalez gets every single penny. I know that's apples to oranges, but I mean, again, come on, guys. Optics matter at some point. Actions are your values. What you do is who you are. And what Idaho's current administration is, this looks nothing but spineless, nothing but cowardice. So I mean, hey, I want to call the episode Profile and Cowardice, because that's to me what this entire volleyball episode has been. Cowardice at every single level, from adults with 6-figure salaries.
Bryan, we obviously try not to shout out Nick Weber. He beat me to it. Terry is Jar Jar. Terry is 100% Jar Jar. There's Star Wars discussion going on in the comment section. EC asking who reminds you more of Emperor Palpatine, Terry or Scott, and Nick Weber jumping in. Terry is Jar Jar. Terry is 100% Jar Jar. Bryan, we try not to speculate overly heavy on this show, at least in the current iteration of this show. But is there any reason to have shuttered this report the way that they did the moment that Gonzalez, quote unquote, resigns, unless you're trying to protect other people? This is obviously what I believe, because I can't see any other reason to do this. If there are anybody out there that's listening to this that understands more about why you would just shutter the investigation and not be doing it because you're trying to protect other people involved that have obviously made a bunch of mistakes, I just don't understand, Bryan. Is there any reason that they could be doing anything at all other than trying to cover up somebody else's screw-ups?
Well, hey, Dallas, you work, like, not to go deep into your background, but like, you have a leadership position where you work. Mm-hmm. So if someone sold you on like, hey, you guys are going to spend $384,000 on an investigation of obvious wrongdoing, and you're going to close it without having thoroughly adjudicated actual wrongdoing, would you do that?
I mean, if our company was on the line, I guess so. If you're being asked that position, I like to think I would be morally superior enough to say, hey, fuck it, we're lying in the bed that we made. But presented with that, the only reason I could see to shutter that and pretend it never happened is because you're trying to protect your ass.
Yeah, until the university tells us, and again, they've got a lot of communication staff to enunciate their message. So what I'd say is, hey, until the university tells us something else, there's no other conclusion to say other than the university thinks protecting current employees who are failing is more important than rectifying problems and becoming a more functional entity. I don't know what else you're supposed to take away, guys, because yeah, $384,000 in the hole to not even be able to fire Chris Gonzalez. What a joke.
Absolutely insane. That, by the way, for anybody that's curious, that would be like a year of Jason X salary plus his media, all the good things. This is money that could have been, again, pushed onto the football coaches to kind of try to keep guys here. If the football program continues to grow the way we think it is, there's so many things that could have been used for, again, $430,000, but instead it was all pissed away on a report that ultimately didn't matter because they got Gonzalez to quote unquote resign by just paying him out all of his contract anyway.
Really, he gets to dodge the indignity of having his name associated with being fired. And I bring that up because you guys remember when Don Verlin was fired for virtually nothing. Truly, Verlin was fired for almost nothing. He had show cause status put on him through the NCAA, where any place that was going to hire him, they would have had to show justification of why you had to hire this person who was fired for these sanctions. Chris Gonzalez, infinitely worse in every single way. Nope, he gets to say he resigned. He gets to say he resigned. He also he already has it in the reports. It's out that apparently he did have something on Terry, and the thing he had on Terry is that Terry lied about not knowing anything when Chris Gonzalez said that she absolutely had. She talked to him about saying that it was all lies. They were all wrong. So, yeah, man. Yeah, now, like, my only hope now, fingers crossed, July 31st. But like, hey, the question is where do we go from here? Look, we're gonna still do the show. We're still gonna go to the game, stuff like that. But there's a real sour taste in my mouth about the University of Idaho right now. Even Terry leaving is it's not if she leaves, because look, if they're not willing to fire Chris Gonzalez over this, they don't have what it takes to fire Terry, which should be like the easiest firing in the world. So if she's gone, it'll be a pretend retirement, or we get to hear about an extension. If she's gone, which if you haven't put together, we think Terry should be gone because of screw up after screw up after screw up after screw up. I don't know what you're taking away from the show, but look, phase one, she should be. There's no question she should be gone, but that doesn't fix everything. Like, there's been no acknowledgement of failure from the university. That's part of making amends. None whatsoever. Not even enough to fire Chris Gonzalez. So again, circling back, where do we go from here? I might just personally have to start being a little more I'm trying to figure the right way to say this without making it off the rails. A little bit more compartmentalized with how I think about the university and athletics, because honestly, I hate having episodes where we talk about administration. Most schools where things are going fine, administrators have high-profile, boring jobs relative to what the public understands, and there's no reason to talk about them. Here we are again, because at Idaho, we've had screw up after screw up after screw up. That's just been 2024 in the University of Idaho.
And drama all the years before it, Brian. This has just been a pattern that nothing comes easy with this athletic department. Again, I'm trying not to go off the rails either, because I could turn this into just a devolved, screaming, unhinged rant because of how frustrated this makes me. Captain 58 putting the bow on top. Where's the beef? Where's the balls to admit a mistake and fire an abusive asshole? Does that take courage to do in 2024? It shouldn't. And you're right. Dan. That's I think that's why I'm so frustrated here. The University of Idaho is very important to me and my life, and I have such a connection to this university because of the way my life developed because I went to school there. And it kills me that there are so many people involved at this school that just don't care about trying to protect any sort of experience for honestly any student. Because if the student athletes are not being protected, they don't give a single shit about the regular student body. If Scott Green can't be bothered to look into his athletic director to see, oh, hey, this is going on, maybe we should look into this. They've been complaining for, again, November 2022 is the first complaint registered against Gonzalez. It took so long to do anything for student athletes where, again, Don Verlin got a show cause penalty for, Bryan, like you said, I mean, attending a pickup game that a guy wasn't supposed to play in, and coaches touching basketballs they weren't supposed to touch in an unpracticed practice, #OnlyTubs. Like, there's such little bureaucratic things that caused Don Verlin to be fired, technically for cause. And you know what? The athletic results that came after Verlin, we're just going to pretend that doesn't, hindsight's 2020. You pretend that, hey, maybe things get better for the basketball program. Okay, I understand why you fired Don Verlin. Technically, he made a mistake. It is what it is. But then you come to this where somebody is doing so much worse and the university fails to take any sort of action. It just feels like all this university cares about are, again, the administrators, Bryan. And it's just sad. It's frustrating. It hurts. It pains me. I mean, Kevin Redenauer is in the comment section saying he's not suggesting volleyball players come here. I'm not suggesting students come here. Why would you want to come to this school right now? If you're paying attention to Idaho at all, why would you want to be a Vandal? And that fucking kills me, Bryan.
Yeah, Eric Stang in the comment section is a classic scenario of the shit hits the fan, and instead of unplugging the fan, they turn the lights off. Complete institutional failure. I guess, hey, let me enunciate this, and this is kind of producing in public, planning in public. I really don't have a lot of warmth in my heart for doing stuff to promote the university at this point, at least for a little bit of time. I think we need a break. We've been talking with the 1889 collective to get them on, and we still want to get them on. The guys who are running that are great guys. They're just private citizens trying to help Idaho take the next step, do the right thing. I think we need to take a break because with the garbage that Idaho's had going on right now, I don't want to be involved in helping paper over and move on to the next thing for no reason at all. So maybe that I got some phone calls to make to reschedule that later out into next year or into next football season. But that's where we're at. This is where we're left. Like, hey, what can you do? I'm not a person who believes in, hey, something bad happened, move on, pretend nothing happened. That's not me. I know I do know that we're going to keep talking sports. So at some point we have to talk something else. Like time does march on. That is how this works out. But I'm not game to make this easier. I'm not game to do anything that feels like, effortlessly charitable. To get people, when they think of University of Idaho right now, to think something other than the ineptitude they should. Which, side note, Scott Green being the head of the Big Sky President's Council, nice timing for that one. I don't know how anyone could look at Idaho and be like, yeah, we want someone who's run the place like this. That's who needs to be here. Pretty dang impressive, dude. Dallas, I think we're ready to go. Captain 58 to close it out. Ain't done shit about the football fight either. Put it all in the MPD, passing the buck. Where does the buck stop? It isn't TG. It isn't Green. Where does it stop? Nick Weber 1889 does give an avenue to support the student athletes outside the University of Idaho. So look, Nick, thank you for bringing that up, because maybe that's what we need to bring. Maybe I should try to bring them on earlier, Nick, because that's the plan, was to have them on pretty quick. Maybe that's what we need, is if you're saying, hey, I want to support Idaho, but I don't want to support current people. Maybe we do. Maybe that's what the right thing for us to do is our next step is to move in that promotion. So, hey guys, disregard my timing. We'll schedule the 1889 episode when we can. But Nick, great point that maybe what you do as a person who loves Idaho, but it just feels unconscionable to support some of the leadership right now. You look for other avenues, and 1889 is a way for some people probably to thread that needle.
Yeah. And Bryan, you're forgiven to, be kind of all over the place timeline wise, because again, producing in public, you weren't expecting me to bring this up, but you did welcome a new member of the family, Charlotte Marceau, born just last week. So
May 30th. That was actually the second day. I was still in the hospital May 31st when I saw the dropped result of the volleyball. And that was part of where the disgust came from. Is like, seriously, like if they're okay doing this to other people's kids, they're okay doing it to mine.
Exactly. It's time. D Green, too many lawyers. Agree. This is just this. There was a time to do the right thing. There's a time Terry Gollick could have done the right thing, and she chose not to. There were a time that so many folks at the University of Idaho could have chose to do the right thing, and they didn't. And that's why we're here now. So, with that said, guys, we're gonna put a bow on the saddest episode of Tubs at the Club. Bryan, any final thoughts?
Yeah, just don't let it die. Like, look, we're gonna move on, but I think it's a cop out to say like, hey, bad thing happened. What do you do about it? Move on. I'm not saying I'm not trying to advise anyone about what you should do personally. But like for me, I'm gonna have to find my way to thread the needle between time marches on. I'm stoked for what Jason X doing, and just still having disgust for my university. We're all going to have to find a way to thread that needle. I'm just personally not a believer in like, hey, well, it's over. What do you do? Move on.
As T Cash pointing it out, saddest episode so far. So everybody, we will be back at some point in the near future with 1889. We'll have any major breaking news that hits with athletics. We'll certainly do episodes on, but for now, we'll see you when we see you. And as always,
go Vandals.
Yeah, go Vandals.
Go Vandals, guys.
Go Vandals.